Hello, fellow Victorians. It's good to see you all again, and you're interested in our state, personal freedoms, and desire for an honest government that serves the people and not themselves. A few weeks ago I was stopped by a police roadblock for a breath test. I noticed how friendly they were being. Friendly to the point that it was noticeable. I wondered what was going on. Then I remembered all the brutal treatment the police dished out to Victorians who protested against Daniel Andrews' COVID-19 restrictions. The police assaulted people who were doing nothing wrong. In fact, the protesters were doing exactly what the police had told them to do, and for some reason the police decided to attack them. Please see video 1 in the description below. Daniel Andrews also sent in the Riot police and the anti-terror police against protesters in Melbourne. Please see video 2 in the description below. But there was far worse. They invented false charges against people. They falsely accused people. Many of these false accusations are now being defeated in the court, thanks to the crowdfunding efforts of certain Victorians. There's also evidence that the police lied under oath in court to bring an unfair and unjust sentence. The police are now demanding that a certain video be removed from YouTube. If you can watch this video, it seems that the reason police want it removed was it indicates strongly that they did not tell the truth in court. Please see video 3 in the description below. If you only watch Victoria's mainstream media, you probably won't know of any of this. You would have been told that the protesters were far-right extremists and troublemakers. Fortunately, there were people who were doing real reporting. They attended the protests, interviewed people, videoed what was happening and what the protesters had to say. You see, Daniel Andrews doesn't like honest and accurate reporting. What you hear from the mainstream Victorian media is only what Daniel Andrews approves of. One news network, the ABC, even admitted that Daniel Andrews has too much editorial control over what they do, and their journalists were getting a bit depressed. I know, it's hard to believe, but that's what the ABC said. Now, some may think this brutal treatment of protesters was necessary because of the public health risk. Then I remembered that this is not the first time that the police have done this. Do you remember the Victorian Patriot movement a few years back? It organised many Victorians to protest against Daniel Andrews' policies. The Victorian police assaulted peaceful protesters in Melbourne. The police brought and handled their assault rifles just to appear more intimidating and threatening. You probably didn't hear about that either. The Patriot movement was painted by the mainstream media as being a far-right group, so you wouldn't pay any attention to them. Daniel Andrews simply hated them because they opposed his policies. The pattern appears to be that when people are not liked by Daniel Andrews, the police assault them with over-the-top force. Then I remembered the BLM protests in Melbourne at the start of 2020. BLM is a left-wing organisation and of course is liked by Daniel Andrews. So what did the police do when BLM had their protests at the very outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic? Were the riot squad and the anti-terrorist police used against them? Of course not. The police actually protected the protesters and later joined in the protest with BLM when prompted. Odd, isn't it, how protesters that Daniel Andrews doesn't like are bullied, assaulted and treated like criminals, while protesters that Andrews does like and approves of, the police join in their protest and protect them. I think it's clear that the police are no longer Victoria's police. Instead, they're Daniel Andrews' police. The police have become heavily politicised, something that should never happen. It is a good bet that Daniel Andrews is somehow behind this corruption of the police. The police are now there to enforce political issues. They pick and choose who they assault and who they protect, depending on the politics of the protesters. The police should apply the same rules to all. They did in the past, but not now. This same thing is happening overseas. The Metropolitan Police in the UK have also become politicised. They enforce the law based on people's politics. If you're on one side of politics, the laws don't apply to you. If you're on the other side of politics, then the police come at you with over-the-top violence. They twist the law, distort what happens, to ensure that wrong-thinking people are punished. So why are the police being overly nice to people right now? I was surprised at how friendly the police were at the breath test. Well, I think this is also Daniel Andrews' influence. Daniel Andrews thinks the police can get away with any act of violence to the public, provided it's followed up by a well-planned marketing campaign. Notice how the police are being advertised now on television and YouTube as being a necessary part of our community. They are ready when called upon to come to our aid. I think this is part of a state-sponsored marketing campaign. The government and police know that they lost a lot of support of the community because of their outrageous politically motivated behaviour, and now they're trying to buy us back with a marketing campaign funded by our own money. So will the police be able to plaster over their outrageous, heavy-handed behaviour simply with a carefully planned marketing campaign? Maybe, but think of this. If the police can cover up their crimes to the public with a marketing campaign funded by our taxpayer money, that will only embolden them to do the same thing again in the future. And it will definitely embolden Daniel Andrews to be rougher with people who he doesn't agree with, because he knows he can get away with it simply by spending public money on a marketing campaign to whitewash the police. Andrews may get away with his little scheme. Many people still only listen to the mainstream media, which is now little more than Daniel Andrews' propaganda and public protection department. For example, people still believe the government narrative on how dangerous COVID-19 is, and still go around wearing face masks when they don't have to. I've spoken to some recently and asked them why. They said it's better to be safe than sorry. They are simply badly informed and are not up to date on the latest information regarding both versions of Omicron, the symptoms and remedial and preventative actions. This is all due to the narrative of the Andrews and other governments. They appear to only listen to the mainstream media, and they believe everything they're told. So Daniel Andrews and the police may well get away with their marketing campaign. If they do, remember this: the police can change in an instant. They can go from being friendly to being rough, heavy-handed brutes, simply because the Premier tells them to. And they will attack anyone the Premier thinks is not supporting him or who is disagreeing with his policies. The police are now fanatical, blind supporters of the Premier. They just change their behaviour based on polling and public opinion. They are not Victoria's police supporting the law fairly as they once did. They are Daniel Andrews' police. By the way, if you think as I do, please remember one thing. Even though the police have become corrupt and politicised, you still need to show them respect. You do not want to get into trouble over something silly or stupid. Save your anger for another day. Take care and stay safe.